Hello guys, I'm here with Jared. Today we're going to have a discussion about DCA bots and grid bots. When is the best time to run these bots? What considerations do we have as traders, as daily traders, to enter on a new DCA bot, or when to stop them? When is the market looking better to take opportunities from a grid or a DCA bot? How are you, Jared, today?
I'm doing well, man. Really excited to be chatting with you. I've watched your videos for a long while. Just so everybody knows, I'm an advisor with 3Commas, here to chat with Mariano and just dive a little bit deeper into the nuances of when to use certain products and the best of each. So thank you, Mariano, for having me, and excited for this conversation.
Exciting. So let me start first with a very simple question. What is your preferred style of bot trading? Do you prefer grid bots, DCA? You spend most of the time with some of them, or you run them all at all times?
So for me, I like 3Commas because I can just set things and forget it. What I find is that when I'm using grids, I usually set them to such a strict parameter that I still have to update them like every other day. So I use grids a little less than what I use on my DCAs, because my DCAs is kind of like, almost like a real sure shot at profits at times. But at the same time, it's like, it's more constant and less maintenance than the grid aspect. But I think out of this conversation, hopefully I'll learn some better utility of both of them.
Yeah, that's cool. In this video, we are going to be talking about different styles as well of grid bots. As you mentioned, you were setting your grids a little bit more tight, and some other people tend to see grid as a long-term opportunity, almost like if you were hodling, and they tend to use also very wide range for the grid, and they just set it and forget it. And that kind of gives you the opposite, a more relaxed kind of ride with grid bots. And let me show you my chart to show you something. So what we are seeing here is Bitcoin throughout many years. And this is a logarithmic chart. So it's kind of showing everything going up. That's just the effect of the logarithmic. Otherwise, it will look like this. But it makes it more easy to explain a few things. Many people say that grid bots are perfect for sideways market. And they're totally right. That's kind of the market where you take the most profits from a grid bot, because the price keeps going up and down.
The crab market, right?
Exactly. So I remember I was running some grid bots in May, July. I set up a grid bot there, and I waited until the price came out from the top. And that's perfect. This sideways market are amazing. But I just want to make people aware that when you're running a sideways market, you can still have a capitulation event. So it's very important when you're running a grid bot that you also have a backup plan. You can run it on a sideways market. I think this is coming up to negative. I'm going to switch that style. Let me revert this. A lot of people think that the best markets to run a grid bot are sideways market, because those are the times when the price is coming up and down, and therefore you take the best profits from a grid bot. And as you can see here, for example, we were 3 months in a row just going sideways. This was a perfect opportunity to run a grid bot.
How did you identify that opportunity, Mariano? Because I mean, I know you have your crystal ball, but how do you know when the best time is, right? Because looking back at it, it looks like a clearly good time for it, but how do you know in that moment?
Of course, when you are here, when you are in a timing like this, the first thing that you're thinking is what everybody's saying on Twitter, and all influencers are saying, we're going to go lower than this. We're going to go lower than this. You're going to get wrecked, all the FUD. And at this time, including this day, where I was like, oh my God, they are right. We're going to go lower, especially when we were going here.
You always feel worse before it recovers. And that's when I tell myself, I think everyone else is feeling this way too. So hold on, just hold on.
But I did one thing, and I think in this way, when we are running hot, when we are seeing RSIs very overbought, when we're seeing the technicals on TradingView very green, those times are the times where people prefer much more to run bots. And actually, those are the times where it's more risky to run these things, because they are overdue for a pullback, for a big correction. But once the correction has already happened and you start going sideways like this, those times are, in my opinion, less risky than running the bot starting at a time where we are very overbought.
You're at the all-time highs, right?
All-time highs, exactly. But there are exceptions, right? So for example, here in this area in 2017, exactly at the blow of top where we started going in a bear market, and people were thinking that this was going to be the bottom, and you could have switched on a grid bot here and say, and for a whole period of 1 year, just feel, well, this is great. We're just going up and down, up and down. But eventually there was a capitulation here, and this capitulation is 50% further to the downside. So if you were running a grid bot here and you're all in, of course, it's extremely painful to see that the price is exiting your grid range right from the bottom, 50% down. So you're
I think that was my common flaw, right? Like I would go all in on a bot. Like I would do everything on one. Like I'd be like, all right, I'm putting all my portfolio in a grid bot, and then the market would tank, and then I'd be chasing it down essentially and losing all the profits that I'd previously made. So you're saying that a percentage of allocation should be put into grid, let's say. And so you kind of have like, you know, several children that you're taking care of in that way.
Definitely. I love crypto. I love bots and I love 3Commas, but I don't trust the market. You know, the market can do anything. And currently, if you look at the news, there's a new variant of COVID. There's the war. There's the Fed.
So many variables.
There's so many things that are always happening. So what I do is I try to play with probabilities. And I think we are doing sideways once more, right? And I'm currently running a grid bot between 30 and 50 on Bitcoin. And I might be wrong. You know, we might do exactly the same here. And I'm not bearish. I'm not bearish at all. And the proof is that I'm running that grid bot. I'm thinking that we are not going to fall, but I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong, it's not the end of the world for me, because I'm not putting everything into this grid bot. I'm just putting one portion, and I have another portion ready to deploy if things go on the opposite direction. And that way I can still profit.
I'd love to dive more into that as we continue the discussion, because I think most important is like, if you're in a grid bot, how do you make sure you don't ride to the bottom with like stop losses and things like that? And I think one thing, like I personally always been afraid of using stop losses from manipulation, where we'll get stopped out and then the market will take back off, and then I'm stuck holding a negative loss in that regard. So I think there's a lot that hopefully the community will even learn on that too.
Yeah. So you can do multiple things. You can use stop losses, as you mentioned. You can have alternative bots doing opposite things to compensate. And let me explain a little bit more on that. For example, let's say we were in this period and we're running a grid bot, and we have 10K to use. That's our whole portfolio. We have only 10K. So personally, I will say, I as a rule, I never put more than 1% on a single idea I have, but that's me. I'm very conservative, and some people are going to laugh at this and say, what? If something wrong, if something is great, just deploy everything. And if something is giving you a lot of profit, just put everything to it. And I do the opposite. I think, this is gone.
Go ahead.
For example, if something is working really great, given my experience, all I think, until when is it going to work well? And what I do is I let the strategy accumulate as much as it can, and eventually I exit. And it could be because there's a correction, and a small correction, and I feel like there's a change in the trend, and maybe I cut the loss there and I say, okay, I'm not running this until it falls further down, and then I will re-enter. You can use, for example, super trend and different indicators to tell you that there might be a change in the trend, and maybe you already made enough profits, and it's a good time to switch it off and to stay off the market. So you can use that. You can use stop loss. You can use alternative bot. And on that, let me explain. If you have here, for example, of the 10K, you have deployed only 1K, okay? And then I will use another 1,000 to run a bot with a big max deviation that could enter the market with open deal ASAP, but a massive max deviation. So I'm talking about 70%, something like that.
So what do you mean by max deviation?
When we go to 3Commas, to the bots, and you create a bot here, and you go to advanced, you're going to see here the max safety order price deviation. And by default, at the moment, we can see that the bot is using 1% to split the safety orders, but you can add more safety orders and you can split them by more percentage and even use a scale that spreads them apart in an incremental way. And as you change these parameters, you're going to see that you're covering more in this percentage there. So let me give an example. Let's say we put a safety order every 10% and we put 4 safety orders. So this is just for an example. Yes, you can see here, we already went to 50%. We are covering 50% to the downside. And if you open this table, you can see how the bot is going to behave. So it's going to open and buy here at 0%. And then if the price falls further 10% down, it will buy again another amount. And then at 20, 30, 40, and 50%. You can manipulate all these things as much as you want. And that can cover situations as bearish as you want. You can say, I want to design a bot that covers all this. And there's going to be a compromise, because if you do that, that bot is going to only profit big this day when you exit, or this day when you exit, actually. But the whole period here, it will be underusing the funds.
So essentially you have one bot and then you have other bots kind of securing the safety of the variables. So it's like the game of chess. If this move happens, you have this bot that's kind of behind it to protect it, and this bot that's aggressive in front of it that's otherwise going to be ready for whatever swing. And meanwhile, the one is getting to do all of the work with its protection behind it and in front of it.
Exactly. And you can see bots. You can see bots as if they were stocks, right? And you can diversify your portfolio. And the same way when you're doing bots instead of stocks, you can say, okay, my grid bot is going to do really well if the market keeps going sideways in the same range with BN. If it exits from the top, I'm going to just stop it and then move on to something else. And if it exits from the bottom and the market goes very bearish, then I will need another bot that will take advantage of that and compensate during a period of time. So maybe during 1 month, that other bot, when you go down, it will fill all the bags and then exit here at big profit. And at that time, your grid will have to wait in red, and eventually is also going to take profit.
Very interesting. As soon as it gets back to that sell phase, I guess you could say, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you hold on to the bag for a little bit, anticipating the recovery of Bitcoin. And otherwise you have bots that are going to offset that loss regardless. But as soon as it comes back, you're going to get back into the green essentially. And at what point do you turn off that bot? Do you leave that on indefinitely, or do you just have it, essentially ready to buy in if the price comes back?
So there's one thing to consider when you're running DCA bots and you have a mixture, a different set of bots, and some of them are very aggressive. Some of them are very conservative with, as we say, with a large max deviation. So what you're going to notice is when the market is bullish, let's focus on an area where we are very bullish. Let's say we're going on all this way up. The conservative bots are going to profit very little, because in order for a DCA bot to profit good, it needs to use the funds. It needs to buy all the funds that are assigned to the bot and then sell them at profit. But that is very difficult to do if the price doesn't go 50% down. How are you going to buy if you didn't go 50% down? So during this whole period, your conservative bots are barely going to be using the funds that is got assigned. So in this area here, my aggressive bots are taking a very important role during this whole period, whereas the conservative is just waiting there for the right opportunity, not using much funds, and just as soon as things start going bearish, then those bots are going to start filling bags. And ideally, when the market is very overheated right here, you will switch off the aggressive bots. So it's a whole kind of a rhythm that you need to get with those bots. Alternatively, you will run only conservative bots. Some people are looking for the gold dream of bots, which is can we get a bot that we just set and forget? What is that magic bot that you can just set and forget? And the same people sometimes are very greedy and they say, can I find a bot that I can set and forget that makes 15% a day? And then, of course, that's really, is actually impossible in my point of view. Either you're conservative and then you set up a bot that has large max deviation that enters only when it's oversold and things like that, or you set a grid bot and you establish a wide range for Bitcoin of over 20K to the upside and downside, and then you can go to sleep and you won't be worried about your bots. If you're looking for,
that's always the concern, is resting easy. And it reminds me of the sea turtle analogy, in which they have 100 of them because a couple will make it, right? So you almost at that point, I think everybody wants to just be like, all right, I'm putting all my money into this bot because it performs, when in reality it's like, what if it doesn't perform? What if it overperforms? And the contingency plans behind it, which I think is a success case of any trader in that.
I remember last year I watched a video from someone that was just getting started on 3Commas, and I found that video amazing because he said that he opened his account on 3Commas around here, and he's someone random on YouTube, and he say, okay, I'm gonna start a bot here, but he kind of make a great decision. He say, I'm just going to set it to the top 5 market cap, and I'm going to set my bot to a large deviation of 60%. And I'm just going to leave it there. And he left it all the way here running the bot. And around this time, the video came out live on YouTube. And he said, oh my God, I love the platform. I love it because literally with such a large max deviation of 60%, you just buy everything at very discount price. And then when the market recovers, you are the happiest person ever. So being patient.
I think personally, I never realized how much the deviation played a factor in this. So deviation is essentially what's leaving that room for error in this.
Yes, but that large deviation is very controversial because aggressive bot traders, they will say that you're wasting your funds when you set up a bot like that. All the way here, everybody's saying, what are you doing with your funds? You should be trading aggressively. But the same people that are saying trade aggressively here are the people that here they disappear and they never come back. Right. And some of them, they say, I got wrecked. I went too far, or I lost all the gains and stuff like that. So if you're not an advanced trader and you haven't been running the bots for a long time, I will say that the best advice came from that YouTuber. And I totally get it. After watching that video, I was like, that makes a lot of sense, And since then, whenever there's someone beginner, I say the first goal you need to make is to lower your greed, and lower a little bit your expectation until you get more familiar with the bots, and don't aim for, 10% a day and stuff like that, because that is a double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, really critical is to have, what I love about 3Commas is the ability to minimize your risk, because when I didn't have 3Commas, I was always checking my phone and being like, oh my God, am I losing money? Am I making money? And it felt great. Like 10% of the time, the rest of the 90% was just FOMO filled. So, having that and being able to automate it based on trends and so forth, I think that having an aggressive strategy, good for those who do it, but there's always that downside risk, especially for people who are just jumping in. It's such it's just a huge risk that otherwise will make or break them in the space in the long term, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And Jared, what is your style for grid bots? And you were mentioning that you prefer to use a tight range. And what was your timing for entering in a grid bot?
I think that I probably have the impatience aspect of many traders, where it's like, I expect my grid bot to be trading 3-4 times a day, right? And I think that that's just clearly not the way to do it based on what you're sharing, in which I try to look and see like, okay, it's looking like right now we're bouncing between 36,000 and 44,000. So maybe I'll set like a really tight grid there. But as soon as it exits or anything of that, whether it's down or up, like I'm like, okay, so do I cancel this grid bot? Do I stop using it? And meanwhile, my DCA bots will still be staying on and usually do pretty well by themselves. moves. So that's how I kind of like, I think that my lines are a little bit tight on that. So how do you do yours? Like I saw you showing previously, like there's tons of entries and exits all the way from the bottom to the top and so forth on your side.
So I'm an enemy of entering on a grid bot when the price on the daily is green. And
yeah,
the reason is, when things are green, everybody's excited, but then there's the potential for massive profit taking is too high. It's too much risk to say, the price now is going up and I'm just going to set a grid here. You're just going to be happy for a few days. And then once there is a correction, you're just going to be left with massive red
fall
bag.
down and hold bags. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to tell you that if you do it here, you're just going to be fine. As I was showing you in the past, that is far from right. You can see here some examples. You could say, okay, this is sideways, it's coming down. You can set a grid bot around here, but then eventually there's still capitulation. There can be. And the same here in 2017. You could say, well, this market is perfect for grid bot because look what it's doing. It's just going up and down. Let's deploy a grid bot. And maybe you realize that the market is great for grid bot and you set it up right here, right in front of the trap. So what I do is I try to slim the chances of getting wrecked by only opening a grid bot once there's some confirmation that we might have found the bottom, but still I'm a little bit of a chicken and I still deploy my grid bot in a potentially going to a lower price. For example, now we are at 40, 41, and my grid is still with a lower price at 33. Not that I'm saying that that's the lowest I think we can go. We can still go to 20, but I think 33, if things go bearish, is more likely, it's more doable. We have never in 10 years ever touched the previous all-time high. There's always a first time for everything, but the likelihood is less. And
what do you mean in that? But we've never touched the all-time high.
So if you look to each of the cycles, each of the all-time highs that we did. So here we are at 20K. Fortunately, this chart is not the historic. Let me pull in the historic. Now we have the whole history. So in here, we got an all-time high, and this is here as well. And we got an all-time high here and another one here. So sorry, I missed the point. What was the question?
So you were talking about never in 10 years have we ever hit an all-time high.
Sorry. Got it. In a cycle, we always put an all-time high. And then in the next cycle, we never revisit the price once we put a new all-time high. So for example, here you get this price. Once you cross it, you never come back down to the all-time high of the previous cycle. And in this 20K that is there, so far, up until today, we haven't even touched it.
So we never hit a bottom of a previous all-time high, is what you're saying.
Exactly. So can it happen? Yes, of course.
Anything can happen in crypto, right?
The war can go even worse than it's been so far, or COVID could also get a new variant that is much more dangerous. Who knows? Economy, etc. And in that case, we might do the unthinkable. Like, for example, if you think about Bitcoin was supposed to do a blow off top, according to all the models, according to the Plan B model as well. And we were supposedly going to go much over 100K. And now look what we are doing is everybody in Twitter and YouTube is scratching their heads saying like wait a minute, what's going on with Bitcoin? So in that context, thinking that we do something that we never done, yes, there's always room for that. But in my case, I'm running my grid bot from 33 to 50 and seeing how it goes, and not with all the funds.
Well, that raises another good question, Mariano, in which, I kind of also looking at things a little bit binary, the if this, then that, right? And, I have two questions. One is that how do you determine whether we're bearish and bullish? And two is how does that impact the way that you structure your DCA bots and grid bots? Because if there's like a one takeaway of like, okay, if we're bearish, or if I feel bearish, I do it this way, or if I'm bullish, I do it this way, that might be an easy way for traders to as well kind of determine, how to move forward in the way they set trades. Now, I'm not asking if you're bearish or bullish now, because nobody needs to hold that liability, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anything you can provide in that advice, I think would be helpful.
So, I mean, there's so many answers to the question of whether you're in a bear market or in a bull market. I'm sure that if you search on YouTube, you're gonna find so many different answers to that. Some people, if you get at -2% on the daily change, they already say this is a bear market. That's
No
a little bit.
rule, right?
That's an extreme, right? So Bitcoin does that every 2 days. That doesn't mean a bear market. There's the whole answer about the making higher highs and higher lows on higher time frames. Like if you look at the weekly, and you might argue that we have been doing that since forever. So we are always in a bull market for Bitcoin. But then if you start dropping the time frame to daily, to 4 hour, then you're gonna see that the structure is not necessarily always in a bull market. Like for example, here, this is obviously a channel trending down. Then here we start putting higher lows and not necessarily higher highs. So it's kind of
Kind of a little
sideways,
sideways.
but breaking this heavy downtrend, which we inherit from last year, and kind of going sideways and trying to prove the point that we can recover. But how do I see what is the
Optimism, right?
in a situation like this, when we see something from 4 hour daily or weekly, and you see the lower lows, the lower highs constantly being sold out, that's a bear trend. And when we are in a bear trend, we are looking for a bottom. And if I feel like we are in such a bear trend, I start getting bullish on grid balls, because I think we have already dropped X%. As I show you before in the chart, sometimes you can fall 60%, and then you can fall that another 60% further. But those things have happened 2 or 3 times in history of Bitcoin. So in 10 years, they're less likely than just doing a sideways and maybe slightly lower. So the risk of running a grid bot and the chances that you can, exit that grid bot in profit sooner are higher when you have already corrected decently, 30-40% down. Then I'm starting to think, maybe there's gonna be an opportunity with a great grid bot, because now we're gonna go slightly bearish, maybe find that final bottom, then do some sideways right before resuming the uptrend. And I'm not saying that if you do that, you're gonna in 1 month make a 50%. It's not like that, but there is certainly less chances of getting wrecked than when you've been doing higher highs and higher lows for many months. Like this is definitely an uptrend. You can confirm it for almost 3-4 months, that constantly putting higher highs and higher lows. Unfortunately, this is when people get the most bullish to do the grid bots, and that's probably the opposite that I will do. And if you heard the say, do the opposite that the people are doing, that pretty much is
The inverse trade.
Very true for grid bot.
Yeah. And when do you have like an optimal kill switch opportunity? You pause your grid bots or DCA bots or anything like that? When do you find like is the best time, or do you ever count your losses? Like for me, like I never know when to turn them on or like leave them off or anything like that. Do you have any rule or rhyme or reason behind that?
So my entries with the bots, I try to find an entry when after a downtrend, I see that we are breaking the downtrend, and we get some confirmation. And for example, you could use an indicator like super trend, which is very basic and easy to understand. This one here, and then you can set it on the daily, for example. Let me remove these drawings. And this is one way of identifying a trend. It's not perfect, it's not the only one, but it's a decent way to identify trend. So for example, I could say, if I see that we are in a downtrend for long enough, and I see that we break the downtrend to the upside, then personally, and this is not financial advice, but personally, I will start considering a grid bot. And at that timing, of course, there can
There's
be
going to be suppression. People are going to want to sell when they essentially are regaining some profits and so forth, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you can explore different timeframes, daily, 4 hour. There's a few variations that improve this thing, like for example, doing Heiken-Ashi candles that remove some of the false signals. That can improve slightly more the accuracy of this, because the problem is if you just use normal candles, you get a lot of these periods on the sideways market that is going to tell you, well, we are bearish, we are bullish, and then 2 days after we are getting bearish and bullish, and that's a lot of friction that you can just remove by switching to Heiken-Ashi candles. As you can see here, that now they're gone. So you get a clear downtrend here, and there's an uptrend, and then this one is saying downtrend again.
Right.
On the daily.
Right. Okay. That's very interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So entering here, not just for grid bots, and definitely I don't wait for the DCA bots in order to profit from them. You probably want to wait for a confirmation like this and then run them, have them running for a few days, following the trend. If it's a long bot, DCA bot, and then as soon as you see that the market is reversing, then exit the market and close your bots and stay on the sidelines. That's the way I do it.
I think that's a really important point that you make, because I know that a lot of people, you might join and start using 3Commas during an optimal time of the market. You might make a lot of money, or, you can do really well, potentially. Again, not investment advice. But that said, I know that a lot of people join and then, just keep those bots active. And then when the market changes, they're like, wow, I'm losing all that I made. When in reality, that's like, you have to be nimble and essentially be ready for those shifts and have those contingencies, because by itself, it's not going to continue to profit under the same thresholds or parameters. You have to be ready and change those, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Although, as I said before as well, this kind of approach and strategy to run bots, it doesn't mean that I switch off everything. And for example, here I get a sell, and all I do is to stay away from aggressive bots, and I switch them all off and I leave them for later, while at the same time, the ones that they have a massive max deviation and they have big funds to buy the dip, I let them do what they were designed for. They were designed to buy a massive dip to the downside, catch the big discount, and then wait weeks until the price starts resuming to the upside to take larger profits. So those are completely different strategies, but it's just an example that not because the trend changed, you need to switch off everything. It's just kind of a, hey, stay away from aggressive bots because you're about to get wrecked.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, Mariano, this has been incredibly helpful. Are there any other quick points or anything else that you feel like we should add in that we haven't covered? I think we've covered, grid bots, good timing, ways to set contingent grid bots and things of that to cover yourself in actions of market behaviors, DCA bots, how to structure them, utilizing great trend indicators and things of that to make your best determinations of when to activate, deactivate, and so forth. I feel more knowledgeable. I hope others do in this that are listening to this, but anything else that we should have as food for thought?
No, I think that the final advice is learn about yourself. If you're a grid book trader, if you're a conservative, if you're a beginner, and acknowledge that and adapt your bot trading to that. Don't just mimic other people, what they're doing. Don't fall in the trap. This dude is making 100% per day. Because if you don't know how is that done, the chances are that you're about to buy a trap.
Yeah, go figure, right? There's plenty of those around. And I think that's great advice, is find your niche and get stronger and stronger every day with it and be resilient, right?
Exactly. Awesome. Right? Thanks very much, Jared.
Of course.
See you
Thank
guys.
you, Mariano.
Take care. Bye-bye.